All right, this video is for the circumference and arc length of a circle. So we're going to start out with a circumference review. All right, circumference of a circle is 2 times pi times r. Or for circumference, we can use pi times d, pi times diameter, where r is the radius of the circle and d is the diameter of the circle. So this says find the circumference of each circle below. So here we're given the radius, here we're given the diameter. So if we're given the radius, we can do 2 pi times the radius. If we're given the diameter, we can just do pi times the diameter. So in your calculator, get all this scooted where we can see it. All right, 2, and then the pi key is right here underneath those double E's. And so if we round, let's do one number after the decimal here. Circumference is about 61.7 inches. Circumference is just inches. We don't have to square it or anything like that. And then for that other one, we've got pi times 6.33, which would give us a circumference of about 19.89, and that one is feet. Okay, sometimes they give it to us in words. Find the diameter of a circle that has a circumference of 138.16. So here we've got the circumference and the diameter. So we're going to use this formula. The circumference is 138.16, which is equal to pi times the diameter. So I can solve this. And all I'm really doing here on this one is just dividing by pi. And so my diameter is about 43.98 inches. This one says find the radius of a circle that has a circumference of 3.3 pi. So sometimes they write answers in terms of pi. This is the most specific answer that you can get because pi is irrational. So if the circumference is 3.3 pi and our formula is 2 pi radius, again we can do menu 3-1, but in here in this case you're just dividing 3.3 pi by 2 pi. Really, you're dividing 3.3 by 2 because the pi's cancel out. Sorry. There we go. And we get a radius that is equal to 1.65 feet. And then finally find the circumference of a circle that has an area of 25 yards. Okay. So, area. Area is pi r squared. So if the area is 25 pi, we can find the radius, pi r squared. So we can do menu 3-1. Now, what happens though is because we're using that squared, menu 3-1 doesn't always work. So I'm going to show you what it looks like by hand so you know what to do. So if I were to solve that by hand, 25 pi equals pi r squared. If I divide by pi, pi's cancel out and I have 25 equals the radius squared, which means radius equals the square root of 25. All I'm doing is square rooting that number that's in front of pi when they give it to me that way. Okay. Just because menu 3-1 won't always work. But if we have the radius, then we can find the circumference. So circumference equals 2 times pi times the radius. 2 pi times the radius. and our circumference. So we can write this two ways. 2 times 5 is 10, and then we can just attach the pi onto it. Since that's how they gave us this answer, we can answer in terms of pi. Or we can answer in a decimal. 31 point, this one will round up, so 42. And that'll be yards. So we have to be able to find circumference to find the measurement of just a piece of the arc. So there's a proportional relationship between the measure of an arc length and the circumference of a circle. And what that is arc length over circumference equals the measure of the central angle over 360. It's a lot to write. It's not a lot to work. We just use and we plug in the pieces. So this says find the value of x. This is, x is representing the arc length here. So that's this piece on top. The circumference is going to be 2 times pi times the radius, 8. So I'm not even breaking it down before I start. The measure of the central angle, that's this piece here, this 160 over 360. So to solve this, we cross multiply and then divide. And we can just type it in just like you see it there. So I am going to put the circumference all in parentheses, 2 times pi times 8. Just give it its own set, times 160 divided by 360, all in one swoop. And I get x, which is that arc length, equals 22.34 yards. Okay. So we're going to find it again. Do the exact same thing one more time. So the arc length over the circumference, 2 times pi, radius is 12, equals, now the measure of the central angle, we need this measurement. So if this piece is 210, then this little blue piece that I'm looking for is 360 minus 210. You can do that ahead of time. It would be 150. Or you can just put the pieces in like that. So when I do this one, I would do 2 pi times 12 times, so cross multiply and divide again, but I would put the 360 minus 210 in parentheses. And so x is going to equal 31.42. We can also answer these in terms of pi. How we do that? So I'm going to go back to this first one. I leave the pi out of the situation. Okay? I'm going to do 2 times 8, do that in parentheses, and then times 160, and then divide by 360. And I get a fraction, but x here, I can just write that fraction and tack the pi onto it. These two represent the same thing. So if I type that fraction in, 64 over 9, and then attach the pi to the end and find a decimal, I get the same decimal equivalent. Okay, so a lot of the times we do write our answers in terms of pi just because they are the most precise, specific answers. And so this one we would do the same way. We would just leave the pi out of it and do it at the very end. So this one we'd have 2 times 12 on the bottom here times 360 minus 210 divided by 360, and we would get 10 pi. Okay, which again, 10 pi gives us the same answer there. All right, and then finally, now we're going to find the measure of the central angle. Okay, so now we have this arc length, which is 15.87. 2 times pi times the radius. So over the circumference, we're looking for the central angle over 360. So we're going to cross multiply and divide here. So when we do it this time, cross multiply and then divide. So 15.87 times 360 divided by, so this one, I'm going to see if this works. But again, 2 pi and then times 7. I'm going to put that all in parentheses. Okay. If we round to two numbers after the decimal here, and typically we round to the nearest whole degree when we're finding an angle measure. So 0.8 says we're going to round up. X is going to equal 130 degrees. So that's it for this video.